Test. Hello, test. All right, good evening, everyone. We are here today for a Tuesday, February 10th, Timnath Town Council work session. We'll be discussing two items today, the Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code and then potential changes to Timnath's Model Service Plan. Before we get started, Ms. Peters Garcia, will you take our roll?
Yes. Mayor Robert Oxmacher.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Luke Wagner.
Here.
Councilmember Jeremy Holt. Councilmember Bill Jenkins.
Here.
Councilmember Lisa Lake.
Here.
All right, very good. Well, first, let's start off with the Colorado Wildlife Resiliency Code. Director Robinson.
Thanks, Mayor, council members. There's going to be throwing a lot of information at you here real quickly, but I can follow up with some FAQs and other things with that. I could probably say you can interrupt me during the slides if you have questions, or would you prefer we wait till the end?
Do you have a preference?
I'm kind of a anything goes, so if you want to interrupt me during, that's completely fine, and I can answer the questions.
All right, we'll try the Wild West approach.
Yes.
Roll the dice.
All right, so tonight I want to just introduce you to the Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code, go over some of the basic requirements, understanding the background of why it came to be, some timelines, exemptions, and other things that we need to consider. I want to get some feedback from you all about the next steps and what our options are here locally. So with that, I'm going to go into a little bit of a background on the Resiliency Code, some timelines, and some graphics about what the code entails, and some next steps that we're looking to do. So some background, this comes about with the wildland-urban interface. This is the area where nature and the built environment commingles, and this is oftentimes where we have seen wildfires begin and burn into our communities. Obviously, the Marshall Fire is pretty present in all our minds, and I think that's probably the genesis for why this came about to be a statewide code. A little graphics here to kind of break down how wildfires can burn structures. Very simple about embers flying in the wind and air. We've had recent power shutdowns over concerns of that concept. Radiant heat, oftentimes when one structure burns, just the sheer heat from that can ignite an adjacent structure, or direct contact from flames. So those are the three scenarios in which structures can burn from wildland fires or wildfires. What the state did in 2025 is they adopted a statewide code with minimum requirements for these wild urban land interface areas. The state put out a map that determines the fire intensity. So there's a graphic later, I'll explain the mapping. I don't want us to get too heavy in the mapping. That's complicated and very expensive for us to go and amend the map. But you might have some questions when you see the map. The new code applies to new construction mostly. That's mostly what we want to talk about. There are situations where additions and changes and modifications would require existing structures to be compliant with the code. So here's just the process. It was adopted last year by the state. Mr. Jenkins.
If someone has a significant addition, would the entire house or just the addition have to comply with the new regulations?
It depends.
Okay,
And,
We'll
and
leave-
you
we'll
might,
leave it
I
at-
might be corrected later, but again, it kind of depends on what you're doing on that. I do believe that it depends on what we change to our code and what map zone you're in. There's a lot of,
got it.
It depends.
Okay, it's complicated.
yes. So here's kind of a general outline of what we're looking at the timeline. So it was adopted by the state in July of '25. Local municipal agencies, counties, other jurisdictions have to adopt the code by April 1st of 2026. And then July 1st, 2026 is the compliant, where we have some reporting requirements to the state to kind of follow up on the status of our code is at. So overall, there's obviously benefits to why we should do that. You can look at it from a community-wide approach that's most effective rather than maybe a property-by-property approach, very similar to building codes. Enhanced public safety, reduces dangers of fire. Again, best practices, we often find out a lot of research after fires that many houses are underinsured. So this is one way to help to make sure that new structures are compliant with building codes and standards, so that in the end, it hopefully will reduce insurance costs so that they minimize the risk of fire. And then there's really kind of the missing piece that creates a great opportunity for education. I know Poudre Valley Fire District often has opportunities to educate homeowners associations and metro districts and others about fire codes, and it gives a good opportunity for those educational opportunities. So here's the map. On the right, you can see this is a snippet of Timnath. I've highlighted some of the subdivisions, and you can see kind of the blue areas are the subdivided small lots, and then you have these hexagons of yellow and orange. That's the intensity. So when you're looking at fire mapping, there's 4 criteria that they look at. The state chose just to use the intensity of how a wildfire would burn. There's also criteria for likelihood, exposure, and susceptibility, but that's what the state did. They chose intensity, and so this is a statewide map that they adopted. So any area that's within that orange or yellow zone will need to comply with the new fire code or the new urban wildland resiliency code. And then class 1, the yellow areas, is the kind of easier part of the code to comply with, and I would say that most of our current new structures already comply with that with our building codes. There are a few differences that I can point out. When you get into the class 2 areas, that's the orange areas, there's a little bit more requirements that would need to be to harden your structure regarding new code requirements. So this,
Can I ask you a quick question?
yes, sir.
Can you go back?
Yep.
What makes a yellow and orange, right? I mean, I'm looking, I'm just picturing in my head that orange area up top there, you know, Saratoga. Why is that orange, but yet?
So I've been in
Half-mile.
monthly meetings with a lot of agencies and fire agencies to understand the mapping. And without getting into the details, again, this is the intensity. So sometimes you look at some of these areas that were, one day was a field and now there's new homes on them. And you look at that like, well, why is we're a subdivision? Part of it's a scaling issue that, you know, when you're doing a statewide map, these hexagons are probably capturing a higher level scale, then you're getting down to those subdivisions. So one of the options local agencies could do is they could request to have the maps amended. I've been told that costs about $200,000 to go through all the appropriate data collection, justification to amend the map. I'm not sure it's worth the benefit of doing that to change a designation from, or some of the boundaries there. That's basically what a lot of communities are coming to that conclusion.
Yeah.
When you look at the standards, you'll understand it's probably not that big of an impact to make that difference. But great question. A lot of people ask, why is part of my subdivision that's completely built out identified as a yellow or orange zone? I don't really have a good answer for you other than it's some of the data layers that was used, and again, the scale for the state was fairly big, and they came up with these hexagons.
Okay.
So again, that's the map that was
Sorry,
adopted by the state, and
Scott,
depending
can I
on
ask
what hex, oh,
A question on that. How often are they gonna update the map?
we don't know yet. Another question that we're trying to find out from the state. I think it's expected to be updated in the future, but last time I've heard, I do not have a timeline on when the map will be updated.
Thank you.
So again, depending on the state map, that's the classification that your area is designated and what part of the fire code you need to comply with. So if you're yellow, you have to meet this low intensity standards. On the far right, you can see what those standards cover. It gets into the type of roof, gutters, fencing, a defensible space. A lot of that stuff we're already doing with our new construction and Metro District landscaping requirements and what have you. If you're in the orange or the red, there's some additional things that we'd have to consider and look at for new construction. Actually, I want to go back a step. So Larimer County recently did adopt this ahead of schedule. What they currently decided to do, and again, Larimer County is a very big area, and they have much different landscapes across their entire jurisdiction, but they basically classified the entire county as a Class 2 level. So that will create some inconsistencies depending on what we want to do as we move forward. So again, if you go back to that map, this whole thing would be painted orange, according to the county. So any area outside of the Timnath municipal boundaries would be a different color than what this map is. Does that make sense? Luke's looking at me like I don't know. I lost Luke on that one. That's okay.
And what was their justification behind it?
Again, I think for consistency, it gets very tricky when you look at this map and you're like, why is my neighborhood orange and you're not? If you're not any color, then you don't have any of the code, and some properties are split in half, so it gets very hard to be consistent, and that goes back to that benefit about a community-wide approach. So there are some areas that might be more susceptible than others, and these imaginary lines cut across properties and what have you. So I think it's more of a consistency approach from the county. They obviously have much more areas that they have to manage than Timnath does for the wild urban land interface than we would.
Yeah, I'm wondering, I mean, I understand why the county might want to do that for consistency of their building codes, just to have one set of building codes that are appropriately fire compliant, or however you want to state that. Is it possible that the insurance companies will vary their rates depending on whether it's Class 1 or Class 2 as designated by the state?
Yes.
Yeah. So,
That's-
but if the county were to do that orange Class 2 statewide, could the insurance companies use that for insurance assessment purposes then?
The insurance piece is coming around where, again, depending on that map designation, and then what.
By the state? Or by the
By
county?
insurance companies looking at the state, because they look at each individual property and do their due diligence, what your insurance would be, and they will base some of that decision on the map and what standards you adopt. So by adopting a higher standard, you're lowering your risk.
Okay.
So there are exemptions in the code. I'm not going to go over all of them, but there's a list of some of the additions. So I think there was a question about if you did an addition, so less than 500 feet. Again, there's some weird nuances in the code, what triggers you'd have to do with siding, what have you. But again, there are some exemptions that are baked into the state code. This is just a nice little infographic on parts of your structure that we would be looking at. So if you look at numbers 1 through 7, a lot of that would be covered under our building code and building inspection process. When you look at the landscaping and fencing, that's the area gets a little bit trickier, and how do you enforce those things? Oftentimes it's with initial certificate of occupancy, where you go in and you can say, hey, you're compliant with the landscaping, but obviously people modify their yards over time, and that gets into education and enforcement down the road. Likewise, same with fencing. So that's when you start getting at the level, and you can see on the far right, the class 1 and class 2, that looks at where those touch points would interface with the changes in building code regarding your structure.
Not to go down a rabbit hole, but is this in partnership with HOAs, right? I mean, I think across the street in the Lennar homes where it's all rock in the front yard, and if somebody wants to change that down the road, I guess that would take, HOA approval. How does that, who supersedes who in that mix?
Well, town code supersedes HOA, so we don't enforce HOA covenants and restrictions, but there will be a need to coordinate and outreach with them on their standards to make sure they're consistent with those rules and regulations. And again, they are not able to, both with landscaping and other, they can't say, well, our code, the town's code and the state's code supersedes their rules. So, yeah.
Thanks.
Great questions. This is, again, I want to keep track of our time because I know Carolyn's got a lot of information about Metro District. So this is just an overview, again, of some of the subdivisions that would be currently impacted by the map with the low intensity zones. Some of the things that would be required with those standards. Again, a lot of this stuff we're kind of already doing with our building codes. There are some cost estimates on what this would cost for new homes versus not that I can provide later with a FAQ sheet. This is the higher zone, the class 2, the orange zone, the additional requirements. These get to be a little bit more costly considerations for structures hardening. As far as the structure ignition zone, zone 2 and 3, you start getting a larger area around the building to make sure your perimeter is hardened and safe. And here's just a nice little graphic of that zone around a house. So the intermediate zone or the immediate zone, that 0 to 5 feet, currently right now, a lot of HOAs kind of limit kind of landscaping. And a lot of that's really done to protect your foundations and other things. That intermediate zone starts getting into some of the landscaping and fencing that we would have to look at. Most of our single family probably don't get to that expanded zone 3 greater than 100 feet, but that's just the zones within a property and when you're looking at hardening and trying to prevent the spread of any wildfire. Again, we talked a little bit about enforcement, so we would capture a lot of this through building inspections. Planners would again look at some of the landscaping options to look at HOAs and metro districts in the future about enforcement, and really a great opportunity for fire districts on education and outreach on that. There is no funding, additional state funding through the state for some of the enforcement. I know there's concerns of other communities about an unfunded mandate, but again, I do believe that we can capture a lot of this with currently what we're doing. So we have a couple options to look at. So there are some flexibility for code interpretations locally. We may choose, like Larimer County, to be more stringent. We can't be less stringent than the state. That's typically how the law works, but we can certainly be more stringent like Larimer County decided to go with. And really, after the initial inspections and whatever, a lot of it kind of falls back on the property owners to make sure that they're compliant, and that kind of falls back into bill that insurance piece, which is probably coming around a couple years later as people are looking at their insurance policies and making sure they're consistent with that.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
With regard to cost, since the state is is not providing any additional dollars towards setting these standards or enforcing them, do you anticipate that the costs for building permits and staff time to review under new proposed rules would take longer, maybe cost more, or do you think it wouldn't have any impact on costs or staff time?
Most of it's materials, so it's not really looking at new designs. It's just like you couldn't put a shake roof on your roof. You have to have an asphalt shingle. Is the siding
Class
fire? Is the siding fire rated, or is it a cedar, hardy plank, cementitious siding? And so it's more about the materials and less about like changing the code. Decks, there's some other requirements. There's some changes in venting. So I don't think it would add additional time per se. The trick gets into the landscaping and fencing. We might have to look at some nominal changes on either permits or fees for inspections on those. I have Sean's here from PFA, and talk a little bit about their perception of enforcement and education on those costs as we go on, but I think I only have one more slide here anyway. So next steps is we have to get this adopted by April 1st. Things that we need to, I'd like some feedback is, do we want to do the state minimum and keep the 3 different levels? Do we want to be consistent with the county or something in between? One of the things that we'll need to do is also have an IGA with Boulder Valley Fire, which they currently have with Laramie County, and I'd recommend we do the same thing. And then again, the compliance aspect is by July 1st, we have to report back to the state. I'm kind of in the camp of recommending that we do kind of a hybrid option where we adopt class 1 for the entire town, because I, again, think that that's a minimal cost and a pretty reasonable standard that I believe we're currently doing. And for the areas that are in that orange, that would be the exception, that they would be consistent with the county at that class 2. Otherwise, the basic option is if you go back to that map, we would have the 3 zones. The areas that aren't colored, the fire code wouldn't apply. Yellow would have one standard and the orange would have the other standard. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. And Sean, I don't know if you want to have any comments you want to provide too. Thanks.
I'll go first, Jeremy, and I'll.
Yeah, I just real quick, remind us again, when you say comply with the county, what the county's doing what?
So the county basically
Went straight to
makes the
2?
entire county comply with class 2. So if you look on the far right on the side, that's all the things that they have to comply with. Yeah.
Scott, can you walk me through? I just want to ask about maybe Old Town in this equation. So I saw that there was first historic. So
Yeah.
Can you talk to me a little bit about historic and what we think might happen down in Old Town as far as like our historic buildings and what we think will happen down there? And then 2, maybe what it would look like as we look to kind of looking to revitalize Old Town, how this might affect some of that going on down there. Would this apply down there as well? Or are we looking at most historic buildings down there? How does this look for Old Town?
I'm not sure if there's any structures in Old Town that are listed on the National Register or not.
There aren't.
So that would be a consideration. As far as the mapping, yes, there are some orange areas in Old Town, and any new, again, this is new, it's, or if they did additions, that's where it gets into compliance. So I don't think it would have a significant impact on existing structures. It's when you're building new or doing additions where they'll have to look at that kind of class 2 level
It would
of,
be the interior alterations though, right?
nothing interior, it's all exterior modification, additions, yeah.
Okay, oh, sorry, that's an exemption.
What about like roofing changes?
Yeah, if you get a new roof, I think that triggers
I would say
Yeah,
that's probably
a
the
new
most
roof
common,
would
right?
put them into, they have to come into the classification
yeah.
for a new roof. So you couldn't put like a wood shake shingle roof on a house
But
or replace it.
regardless of this anyway, if they're gonna replace it, like if they replace anyone in the town, if they replace their roof, they have to abide by new code anyway, correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah. Which is class 4, and I would imagine all of the class 4 shingles meet the
that's all
Higher
asphalt shingles,
standard.
yeah.
as well. So I think we're already there. I guess my question is if we went class 1 for the entire town, am I correct in understanding that current code for new houses or new structures being built today would meet the class 1 requirements?
Yeah, I checked with our building official, so if you, again, look at this slide, that numbers 1 through 7 on the building kind of touch the building code. And we're kind of doing a lot of that already. When you get into the landscaping and fencing, some of the HOA metro districts have that immediate zone, that 0 to 5 feet around your foundation where there's no
Right.
planting. So we're already kind of doing that class 1 right now. So.
Because I think that would be the big question, is it going to drive up costs across the board? And it sounds like the answer is no, because we're already pretty much compliant with the class 1 requirements.
And I can't remember what the estimated costs were. So like in Larimer County, if you were to build a new house, do you remember what it is? It's like, I think they estimate $1,200 at a class 1 change. The class 2 gets to be a little bit more
Yeah,
expensive. But
I would think that would be a little more tricky, like windows, for example. Would the vinyl frame windows qualify? Maybe not, because they'd melt. So, and pretty much every developer uses the vinyl clad windows, unless it's a custom home.
I went way over my allotted time.
Can I ask one last question? So looking at sorry, if you could go back to that one slide you just had there. So the landscaping and the fencing, do you know right now if any of the HOAs or metro districts currently use, like, for example, fencing? The fencing on the side of my house goes right up to my garage, and it's a wood fence.
So fencing, the fencing requirement is 8 feet. You can use wood fencing and you can actually use vinyl fencing. Town doesn't allow some of that, or metro districts have other standards, but that 8-foot zone that you connect your fence to your house would have to be a non-combustible item. But since you have an existing fence, it wouldn't.
Right, but those tend to need to be replaced at some point as
Well, again,
well.
that would be a lawfully non-conforming but any new fence, like if you didn't have a fence before and put a new one in, I think that's where you'd be looking at that.
Okay, thank you.
So I want to make sure I hear everything correctly. We do not believe that adopting Class 1 universally significantly increases the cost of a new home, correct?
Correct, and I can share the FAQs that was provided. I do want to give some acknowledgement to, we did receive a free educational process about this for community planning assistance for wildfire program through the state. So Timnath is part of that. They've been working with me on putting together the code, and I can provide some handouts to you on those FAQs. But
So, Council, assuming that is true, are we comfortable with a blanket Class 1 requirement around town? And then your recommendation is that we only apply Class 2 to the orange areas on the map, as opposed to adopting Class 2 for all of town, correct?
yeah, I mean, we could do what Larimer County's doing for consistency, but I think There are some costs associated with that, and I think probably in their thinking, any new development would be requesting to be annexed into Timnath anyway.
Mhm.
So that's probably why they went that route. I'm just
Yeah.
guessing.
Scott, I can agree with you. I helped with the Timnath, or I'm sorry, with the Lemmer County adoption as well. The intent is that they can do that because everything that's class one is within somebody else's jurisdiction, right? Like Timnath has all the class one, City of Fort Collins has all the class ones. They have very minimal spots versus all the vast majority of timber and wildland area that they do have. So for them, it was much easier to go that direction versus trying to coordinate. So that was their intent. Then in the question on the permitting, we don't anticipate any longer turnaround times or any extra cost to anything, because this is really just a stick and paste. These are just comments that are gonna be pre-made, and it's on the builders and the architects to, bring it to the code that it needs to be once we put the requirements out there for them. So not a lot of extra work on the building and fire departments.
And then, council, any concerns with the recommendation of only applying Class 2 in the orange portions of the map?
No. I just want to, how will the communication go out to the Class 2 residents or the properties? How do you envision that?
Well, this
working?
would all be with new construction, so we'd be working with builders and developers on that.
Let
In that
me-
regard,
Go ahead.
Yeah, but like, for example, somebody in Old Town that wants to put up a decent-sized shed, are they getting a building permit for that anyway and are gonna have to meet the requirements in the building permit? Or is that, if I just wanna throw up a 15 by 15 shed in my backyard,
they
which is
need
more
they need a permit from it.
for that,
Yeah.
right? More than 120 square feet, is that what it is?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. And then for that, it would have to conform to that.
Yep.
Guidelines at that point.
Similarly, since ADUs are becoming popular, it would apply, I presume, to ADU units, but if somebody put in an ADU that's completely separate, it would apply to that ADU, but not to the house on the property. Good, thank you.
Very good. So Scott, do you have what you need?
I do, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate you. All right. Shall we move on to metro districts?
Yeah, that sounds great. So I want to start by introducing you guys to Rebecca Townsend. She's an associate in my office. I actually have one that helped me prepare for this presentation. So she's here in case we have any questions that stump me, or, I encourage you guys to meet her after the break. So hopefully we'll get through as much of this as we can. There's a lot of material here, and we could talk about this all night, but we're trying to keep it high level to ask for your feedback on a definitive amount of issues. So I'm going to do it a little differently than Scott and ask you to hold your questions, because I might answer them, and then we'll come back and give you guys some discussion time. Okay. All right. So wait a minute. It's not here. It disappeared. Okay, well, while we're getting that pulled up, I'll just start talking. So, why are we here? I think it makes sense to take a look at your Metro District policy, given a number of different things that are going on statewide and the development of the town over the past few years. So, first of all, metropolitan districts, as you know, are independent units of state government, however, of local government, but people come with questions all the time to council and town about their metropolitan districts. So what's the role of the town with a metropolitan district? The main role you have is approving the service plans for when a district is first originally organized. So a service plan will then set the limitations, thank you, on the operations of the metropolitan district, and they serve important purposes because they can help finance public improvements that are needed to encourage development at tax exempt financing, so at more effective rates of interest that they can borrow than what developers can borrow money at, and then they repay that back over property taxes or fees. They can also own, operate, and maintain those public improvements and provide some enforcement services like covenant enforcement and design review services. the town's role is if you have a metropolitan district which is organized entirely within the town, then the town is the approving governing body. And we require that the annexation be completed before that comes to you for approval. We also do require that metropolitans have generally submitted a preliminary plat so that they're far enough in the development that we can know what public improvements they're going to need before we ask them to come to you. Once they're organized, they only have the powers that are authorized under the Special District Act or necessarily implied to carry out those powers and subject to all of the limitations in the service plan. So your biggest oversight role is during the initial approval of that service plan. Once that's approved, they have to conform as far as practicable to the approved service plan and come back to you if they have any amendment to the service plan, which is a material departure from the original approval. They also file annual reports with the town, and they sometimes need the town's consent for other actions, like if they have a fee increase over 3%, they might come back to you for those approvals. So those are the times when you see the metropolitan districts. Otherwise, they operate pretty independently. The town also has an IGA with each of the districts. So if they were to violate their service plan, your enforcement powers are seeking an injunction in the state court or seeking a contract enforcement action for enforcement of the intergovernmental agreement. Those are right now your authority. Okay, so why are we coming back to you? First of all, we do recommend some updates to your model service plan, regardless of whether you want to make any policy changes in direction. One reason is because there's been a lot of legislation on metropolitan districts in the last 5 years since the town last updated their model service plan. So we can come in accordance with those. The main purpose of this legislative move on the statewide level is to increase transparency for residents. So you see requirements such as having to list certain things on their website, to have an annual meeting where they have to give notice to all of the residents of those annual meetings, to require disclosures upon the sale of the property. So that's the main. I think in the interest of time, I might not go through all these legislative updates, but I'm happy to give you a copy of these. But these are legislative changes that have been made. You know, they can't prohibit flags and xeriscaping and certain things that are against public policy. They have to have, if they provide covenant enforcement services, they have to have a policy on enforcement, and they can't foreclose a lien on the property, so they can't foreclose the property for a covenant violation, but they can certify it to the Secretary of State for collection with taxes. So that's what's been happening on a statewide level. Is there's been a lot of concern about abuse of metropolitan districts starting about, I don't know, 8 to 10 years ago, where there was a lot of articles in the Denver Post, a lot of concern that have then led to this slew of legislation. We see something new every year. Okay. We're also seeing other local governments updating their service plans and updating their requirements for special districts. So I think I want to make sure that your policy is still in line with where you want to go. And here's some examples. Loveland put in a moratorium on metropolitan districts while they re-looked at their model service plan, and then they adopted 18-point criteria for when they approved service plans. Their main goals were increased transparency for their residents and having increased enforcement powers. I'll get back to that a little bit more. Commerce City also had a moratorium and updated their regulations. Fort Collins did a moratorium and updated their metro district policy. They now require that the metropolitan district prove that they have extraordinary public benefits that they're providing in order to organize a metropolitan district. So not just everybody gets a metropolitan district as a matter of course, because it has become very common in Colorado that to develop, there's an assumption that you almost need a metropolitan district for it to be cost effective. And there's some studies about that, but let's see. Johnstown, Severance, Windsor, they have been updating their codes over time. I think Windsor's one of the few that's gone the direction of being more permissive, in that they used to, up until December 2025, said that you could only tax your properties for 30 years to pay for the cost of public improvements. Now, the state statute allows 40, and most of other jurisdictions allow 40 years, so they actually, in December, changed that to allow 40 years of taxation on their residents. Okay. The town has a special district policy. Let's start there, if anyone's unaware of that. And it was included in the, in a copy of the packet so that you could see what your current policy is. Very interestingly, it does have goals of metropolitan districts and intent. And one of the intents is, oh, I'm missing a slide. Hold on. Where'd that slide go? I don't know. I lost the slide. Okay, well, anyway, one of the intents that you have is that one up there, to permit the use of metro districts that serve only residential, commercial, industrial developments that will enhance the quality of the entire community. Well, when we get an application and we're looking at that as staff, we don't know exactly what you're looking for in terms of, does it benefit the entire community? Basically, any development can probably make an argument they're benefiting the community. So in this case, what we're going to ask you in terms of a policy question is, do you want to put in any more concrete goals that align with kind of town comprehensive goals that would say, if you're organizing a new metropolitan district, we'd like you to enhance the community in ways such as, so that we're coming with kind of expecting them to go above and beyond when they're organizing a metropolitan district. So some of the things we brainstormed as staff is including affordable housing in your development, land preservation or conservation, increased energy efficiency in development. Oh, and I'll add, I forgot to put, putting in a non-potable water system, so water efficiency. I think it'd be helpful if they can enforce your noxious weed plans, your wildfire resiliency requirements. And do they have economic development consistent with town goals? For instance, if they're wanting to put in a data center or a prison or something that may be economic development, it may not align with what you're expecting to see on the property. So in terms of how does that align with the town goals and the comp plan when they're proposing a metropolitan district? Fort Collins, I mentioned their new policy requires extraordinary public benefit. So they gave 4 focus areas: environmental sustainability, critical public infrastructure, in things where the town has identified that they want to make improvements to existing infrastructure. Smart growth, so does it have public space, walkability, multimodal, mixed use, increased density, and their strategic priorities as a town in terms of affordable development, infill, redevelopment, job growth. So my question for you is going to be, do you want us to just keep it as is? Or do you want us to put in more identified key goals and bring that to you when we come back with a new policy? I'm going to come back, get through the presentation and come back to you with my questions, but that's the first question I wanted you guys to think about. Okay, the second question is the mill levy limit. And we recently had a resident who was also a board member of one of the metropolitan districts come to the district trying to understand what mill levy limit his district could impose. He thought that our mill levy limit was 50 mills and his district was imposing 55 mills, 56 mills. And the way that is phrased right now is that there's an aggregate mill limit of 50 mills for every metropolitan district in this town. However, that's adjusted based on changes in the method of calculating the assessed valuation. So in practice, your current limit is 57.5 mills, okay? And that's going to keep, that's for residential. That's probably going to keep increasing over time. So if the assessed valuation ratio changes from 6.7 to 6.5, they're allowed to collect as much money as they could have had if the ratio had stayed at 6.7%. And so that way the mill levy keeps going up, if that makes sense. Right now under your under your model service plan, the mill levy limit is based on 2018. And I think the thought was, well, we want everyone to be able to collect 57.5 to make an even playing field. But you can look at it the opposite way to say, everyone gets 50 when you organize your district. You can adjust it from there. And that also makes sense because if you're organizing a new district, 10 years later than 2018, it's going to increase for 10 years longer into the future. So that, I think it could make sense. Another thing is that we just have an aggregate mill levy cap right now. And what that does is it encourages metropolitan districts to go out and issue debt where they need most of the 50 mills to repay the debt. That leaves very little mill levies available for operations and maintenance. And that's led to higher operating costs and fees, and also metropolitan districts saying, well, I can't do that maintenance because I don't have enough money. So some of your neighbors have separate mill levy limits for operations and maintenance and for debt limit. So looking at what your neighbors do, this is an example of some of your neighbors. Some of them do have lower aggregate mill limits than you. Loveland is higher at the 60 mills. Johnstown and Severance are at 40 mills. Windsor is at 39. And then, I might need to double check if that aggregate includes, I think Johnstown is at 50 as an aggregate, so I think it's 10 for operations and maintenance and 40 for debt service for a 50 as an aggregate. And then most of them adjust it from the date of service plan approval rather than adjusting it from an earlier date of 2018. So it's really a question of what mill levy limit are you guys comfortable with as a starting point? Do you like the 50 mills? Do you want to decrease that overall mill levy cap? Do you want to adjust it from the date of service plan approval instead of 2018? And do you want to have a separate debt mill levy limit and operations mill levy limit? What that would do, if you kept the total at 50, but you said you can use up to 40 for debt and up to 10 for operations and maintenance, that means they can finance less public improvements. So that's the effect of that, is it's limiting how much money the district can borrow to pay for those initial public improvements. However, it does give them more money available for that for the long-term operations. Okay, next one is debt repayment, and I know I'm throwing a lot at you. Debt repayment, currently we say that we will impose mill levies again. Okay, so you can't tax any residential property for more than 40 years. Yep. Well, under state law and under our model service plan. So our service plan could limit it more. No, actually not state law. State law says that each debt issuance cannot be more than 40 years, but you could do consecutive debt issuances. So you could, have debt for 100 years. But our model service plan says you can't tax for public improvement purposes for your debt any residential property for more than 40 years. And, okay, so that most of your neighbors do have the limit based on 40 years of you can't tax for more than 40 years. But Loveland does something very interesting, is they say no new debt can be issued more than 10 years after you organize your district. So you have to get in there, you have to organize your district and issue your debt. So it gives them an incentive to move forward with the development and to not come back, 10, 20 years later, 30 years later and be issuing new debt. And it also, if they wanted to, they'd have to come back to the town council and justify why they weren't able to do it within that time limit. They also say if you haven't issued any debt in 5 years, you have to dissolve your district. So right now we have a situation where a district could organize, then go dormant, and 10 years could pass, 20 years could pass, your policy might be updated. They still have the ability to issue that debt whenever they want. So one thing that could be helpful is putting into that model service plan some sort of limit on organization of when they can issue their debt. Severance does have a 30-year limit. As I mentioned, Windsor had a 30-year limit on taxation until December, but not anymore. But it is a policy decision if you said, I don't want my residents to be taxed for as long into the future. So basically, the bottom line is that the town approval of a service plan is a legislative action. So you have the ability to impose limitations that you feel are appropriate. And so this is what we've set, but it's good to look at these every once in a while. So do you want to keep it at 40 years? Do you want to say you can tax them for 40 years, but not longer than 45 years from service plan approval? That's what Windsor does. So you, it's the lesser, if you issue debt in year 6, then you only have 39 years of taxation. Or you could decrease it to something like 35 years of taxation. And the last one I wanted to bring to your attention was non-potable water. And I know that this is important. I think we could change right now we're silent on non-potable water, but we could add some language into the model service plan that maybe allows them to own non-potable water without prior town consent, or encourages them to put in non-potable water systems by considering that one of the benefits that would allow you to get a service plan in the first place, or even just putting in language saying, we require to use non-potable water for your district-owned common areas, and then they'd have to come show you an exception of why they didn't need that. So what we're planning to do is come back to you with some proposed changes to your model service plan, and we're going to propose a lot of changes that we think will help increase transparency and protection for your residents regardless. Things like the districts have to hold meetings within the town boundaries after they have residents. Not currently a requirement, but we think it's a good idea. So we're going to have those staff-related suggestions that we weren't big enough to bring to you at a work session, but these were the big policy issues where we wanted to just get a gut check of, if you're still comfortable with metropolitan districts, do you want them to prove more to be organized? Do you want to put more limitations on their taxation powers? And with that, we have like 8 minutes.
Yeah, let me ask Carolyn, in terms of the urgency of this, what I don't want to do is just make some snap decisions in 8 minutes here. Is this the sort of thing that we could ask some questions now and then I'll digest it and maybe circle back on a second work session to actually work through these answers?
We could definitely do that, yeah. And then you've got the model service plan, and so you can go back in and research that. So that would be just fine. We can also continue this, but we can definitely, I think you'll get some service plan applications at some point. So there's a little, we'd like to get this updated before you get another service plan application ideally, but in terms of urgency, that's the only thing. This is establishing policy for long into the future.
I mean, my sense is, that this is a hot button issue. We really want to get it right. And, if we felt like there was an urgent need and it made sense to explore a moratorium, I'd rather do that and get it right than just push it through.
I expect you will get some applications. Remember, districts try to organize before November elections so that they can run Tabor questions at those November elections or before a town general election. There's a couple of districts that have been talking about organizing for several years. I think Wild Wing has talked about maybe coming in. So if a moratorium is definitely an option we could bring back to you if you say, let's take a 6-month time out and rework our policy if you feel that there's enough work to be done here. So that's one of the questions.
Okay. Let's just take a couple of minutes for critical questions here and then.
Just a quick follow-up for me. I don't think even 5 minutes we'll get through one of mine or Luke's. If you can send us an email to just I mean, you asked us a lot of questions, which I was frantically trying to write those down. The key points that we're trying to accomplish with this, so we can put our thoughts into actually the questions around those questions, would be great. And then maybe this is I should know the answer to it, but I don't. So when it comes to debt and the Metro District, just by formation of a Metro District, there needs to be debt in order to tax, correct?
No, there's two types of they could have operations and maintenance mill levy. So yeah, so they generally have one to pay for public improvements, and they borrow the money to pay for public improvements, and another whole debt tranche that's for operations and maintenance.
Okay. And then my other question would be, as part of one of yours is, do we want to opt in to have the levy to allow for the, more of the future of the operational aspect of it? Is that pretty standard, or is it normally just one, or is it broken into two? Is that standard?
Maybe 50-50. I would say, I don't know if it's more common or not to have them broken into two tranches, but it's pretty common.
And currently, as it sits, there's nothing that restricts somebody coming in at year 30 and issuing more debt for another 40 years.
No, there is. Right now, they can't tax a residential property for more than 40 years.
Okay. But I thought you said something about it, but if they issue more debt, they can go for another 40.
Under state law, but not under our model service
Under
plan.
ours, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
So,
And we can also continue this till after your regular meeting. It's up to you. If you want another couple minutes for questions, because
I think this is a very complicated issue, and I don't think we can get to it in 5 minutes. I am with the mayor. I think we need another session that's more in-depth, where it's a discussion, question, answer, to better understand a variety of issues that this topic raises, with then some suggestions on how the council feels we should move forward, and then review what you come back with. And I think that's going to take time. So I'm actually in favor of some length of a reasonable moratorium so we can get it right the first time. I have a whole host of questions which I'm not going to raise right now because there's not enough time. But I'd like us to figure out how to make the time to go over all the issues and come up with what we think is the right way to move forward.
Completely agree. Carolyn, my question for you is, as a council, what level of restrictions or rules can we put on metro districts? And when I say that, like, can we say things like, and so I just throw this out as a general question, like, can we say, they cannot raise O&M fees without a resident-led board? Are those
Yes.
things we can put in there? So
Yes.
we have all those powers and discretion as
You have a lot
council.
of discretion. It would not apply to your existing metro districts, only the new ones, because you're talking about amending the model service plan. But yes, it's balancing having enough restrictions to protect your residents, but not so many that your development stalls or can't go forward. So it's that.
Understood.
Yeah.
Understood. And one thing I think for this council also to consider as being a metro district resident, I would like to also, in our next one, also talk about the obligations, like having developer reimbursements, those being also on that. Not only what the metro districts can issue, but the reimbursements back to the developer, they're not on there. So I'd like to discuss that as well.
Okay, so go ahead, Lisa, I'm sorry.
So to add on to a little bit about the O&M fees, so I know you showed how some service plans have where they can have debt specifically for that. If that were the case, is there any limitation to them also having, like my metro district has just the regular mill levy, but then we have separate O&M fees? If the O&M fees were part of the mill levies, that wouldn't prevent them from having additional O&M fees outside of that. Is that correct?
Yes, but you could put limitations on fees also in your model service plan. So right now, what we say is they need to put in their initial proposal. So you say, okay, are they proposing $500 a month? What are they proposing? And then we say they can increase it up to 3%, or they need to come back to council if they want a bigger increase. So that's how you can manage the fees, is you could put some sort of a limit in there on fees and require town consent if they wanted to adjust those fees. It means they need to come back to you, but yeah. So there's pros and cons, but yeah.
So what I'm hearing is prepare a moratorium and then maybe schedule, you guys think, a 2-hour work session to really work through this?
Great. Well, thanks for bearing with me for this really quick one through. That's basically, I just want to get your temperature and even how much you wanted to delve into this. So that's extremely helpful. I'll email you a copy of these slides so you can look at them in more detail. And then, yeah, if you have more suggestions about things you want to cover in that work session, feel free to shoot me your questions, things you want to, and we can prepare for that.
Great. Thank you, Carolyn. This orientation was very helpful. Council, do we want to plow through, or do you want to do a 5-minute reset and reset? Okay. Perfect. Sounds like everyone could benefit from break. So we will recess adjourn the work session, and let's plan to convene at 6:10.
Okay. I know, I do have two. You ready? Lisa was like, I thought everything.
All right, welcome back. I will call to order the Tuesday, February 10th, Timnath Town Council meeting. Ms. Garcia, can you please take the roll?
Yes. Mayor Robert Oxmacher,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Luke Wagner,
Here.
Councilmember Jeremy Holt,
Here.
Councilmember Bill Jenkins,
Here.
Councilmember Lisa Lake.
Here.
All right, excellent. Everybody is present and accounted for. Council, any requests to amend the agenda this evening? All right. Hearing none, we will move on. We have a proclamation this evening, so let me first ask Councilmember Jenkins to introduce that for us.
Sure. So the proclamation, whereas Engineers Week was started in 1951 by the National Society of Professional Engineers to raise public awareness of engineers' positive contributions to quality of life, and whereas Engineers Week is celebrated in February at the time of George Washington's birthday because he was an engineer as well as our nation's first president. And whereas each year Engineers Week reaches thousands of schools, businesses, and community groups across the United States. And whereas the important efforts of engineers help drive our economy, protect our environment, and ensure public safety, and whereas the engineers of the state of Colorado and the town of Timnath will actively help to maintain and sustain the vital infrastructure of our civilized and natural environments, and whereas engineers help America remain at the forefront of technological development and contribute to countless breakthroughs that improve the quality of life for people throughout the world. Now, therefore, Robert Oxmacher, Mayor of the town of Timnath, do hereby proclaim February 22nd to the 28th, 2026 as National Engineers Week in the town of Timnath.
Thank you, sir, very much for reading that. And I would like to invite one of our local residents and member of the American Society of Civil Engineers, Caleb Stock. Sir, thank you for joining us, and thank you for bringing this to our attention. There's a little button there. It's a little guy with a speaker. Yeah, there you are. Yeah, there you are. Perfect.
Oh, red is on, okay.
Great. No, thanks for being here. I know you've got some exciting stuff going on here with the kids, so
Yeah.
can you tell us a little bit about that?
I do, so thank you for Councilmember Jenkins for reading that. I've had to read that for other towns, and it's kind of a mouthful. I did not write it. But yeah, we just were trying to raise awareness as part of ASCE, which is American Society of Civil Engineers. So it's really for all engineers, but I'm specifically speaking about civil engineers. A lot of times, you only hear civil engineers in the news when bad things happen, a levee breaks, town doesn't have clean drinking water, or a bridge collapses, that kind of stuff. So trying to raise positive awareness of what civil engineers are doing constantly every day and how our designs are keeping communities safe. So with that, we try and do things like this, reaching out to get Engineers Week declared. We do release a infrastructure report card, and we just released Colorado's last year. We gave Colorado a C-. So not sure if you'd be happy with that with your kids. The national average is a C, so we're below average on that. So certainly willing to talk to council members or the community about that. And then what the mayor was alluding to is we also try and get out to the community and talk to students to get them excited to be civil engineers. So we're going to be in town, Timnath Elementary pretty soon, and talking to fifth graders, and we'll give a brief presentation because I know how long their attention spans are. I got a fifth grader of my own. But then we're going to build paper towers with them and talk to them about just different civil engineering design principles that can be applied to something as simple as building a paper tower. So I know you guys got work to do, so thank you for that. I'm going to give back my time here, and always willing to talk more. I am double booked for parent duties tonight, so I'm going to take off in a few minutes here, but please reach out if anyone has any questions on what I've said here or what I'm going to be doing around the community.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And if you have a minute, we would love to take a picture and maybe invite some of our town engineering staff as well to come up and join us if you have a moment.
Yeah, that'd be great. Earl, can you come around to the left side?
All right, moving onward. Next, it is our time for public comment. Public comment is an opportunity for members of the public to communicate with council and share their thoughts. This is a time for council to be able to listen. We ask folks to speak on any item that doesn't otherwise have a public hearing scheduled. This evening, we have two public hearings, which is the ordinance amending the town code related to penalties for criminal violations and ordinance amending the municipal code to reflect town operational and statutory changes. If you'd like to speak on those items, we'd ask you to wait until we call those specifically. But if you'd like to address council on general matters, we invite you to do so this evening. Each speaker has 3 minutes. So we've had 4 people sign up. So first, let me invite Ms. Lee Godfrey. And if you'll just state your name and address. And
One more time.
Need the engineer to tell me how to do that.
perfect.
Yeah, Lee Godfrey, 4403 Caramel Street in Timnath. Appreciate you letting me speak, and I always want to say thank you to everybody that works in government. I know it's a thankless job. I decided to do something exciting the other night and scrolled through the entire 256 pages of the minutes on the budget, and I had a couple of questions. In the budget, there is a line item on page 63. It says that it's town branding, and the budget is $85,000. So I just wasn't sure what that was. Are you thinking about having a new logo? And if so, I don't think we need a new one. I really like that one. Is that for new signage? I just wasn't sure what that was for. And if you can tell me what staff person to speak to clarify that, I would appreciate it. Just curious. The other thing that I noticed and I wanted to speak about was the intersection at 4th Avenue and Timnath Parkway. It is a dangerous intersection. I don't drive an F-150 raised up mud buggy. I drive a little Camry. And when I come to that intersection to make a left or even a right turn, the sight distance is low due to the planters. And I do love the planters. The speed limit right now is 35. It was 40. I was hoping you might consider reducing that to 35. When I'm going 40, they come up behind me doing 50, trying to push me out of the way. And right now, I think a 4-way stop would be beneficial. But when you put in the rec center, I'm assuming you're talking about either a four-way stop or a stoplight there, because there'll be a lot of traffic at that intersection. And I know that's a ways off, but something to think about. And also in the budget, I'm not sure if I read this right, there's some parts of that you're thinking about making into a 4-lane. And I know it's wide enough. If you do that, it really will become a pretty dangerous intersection because people are already speeding. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Godfrey. We appreciate your comments. I know that Director Stone with Public Works here has heard what you have to say, and then also Lisa with Finance has heard what you have to say here as well. Feel free to call the town. Susan's right behind you. She'd be happy to connect you with folks that can answer your questions. Appreciate that. All right, next up, I have Joan Dooley.
Thank you for Okay, my name is Joan Dooley, and I live at 6733 Clovis Court in Timnath. And I am talking about ICE today. So citizens of Timnath are seeking clarity, transparency, and guidance regarding recent reports of increased immigration and custom enforcement activity across Colorado, including in nearby communities such as Denver, Loveland, and Fort Collins. Our town is home to families, workers, and neighbors of many backgrounds and immigration statuses. Uncertainty and fear help no one. Clear information and local leadership do. We are asking the town of Timnath to clarify the role of our local government, ensure residents understand their rights, and reduce fear caused by uncertainty and misinformation. We respectfully ask Timnath Town Council and staff, including the Timnath Police Department, to review the following questions and provide public answers to the community as soon as reasonably possibly, ideally within 30 calendar days. Have any Timnath residents been detained or taken into custody by ICE within town limits? If so, what are the details? Have any individuals working in Timnath businesses or job sites been detained by ICE? If so, what are the details? What should Timnath residents do if unidentified or masked individuals come to their home, workplace, child care center, or place of worship claiming to be federal immigration agents? Can residents expect assistance or intervention from Timnath police in such situations, and under what circumstances? What resources or protections are available for neighbors who are living and working here legally on visas or other authorized status? What is the town of Timnath's current working relationship, if any, with the Department of Homeland Security and ICE? Timnath uses flock safety software for a number of cameras across town. Do Timnath police share the flock software data for ICE immigration enforcement? If so, please explain. If not, is the town council willing to adopt a resolution stating that Timnath police will not share any flock software data with ICE? Will Timnath police assist ICE in executing administrative immigration warrants that are not signed by a judge? Does the town have written policies that guide how the town of Timnath Police Department interacts with federal immigration authorities? If so, please share them with us publicly. The people of Timnath need clear guidance to keep themselves and their neighbors safe while understanding the role and limits of our local government. Transparent communication builds trust and reduces panic, rumors, and misinformation. We respectfully ask that your responses be shared publicly with the community within 30 days. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dooley. We appreciate your time today. I believe you're familiar with our police chief who is here, and we will make sure, and if she doesn't already have a copy, share these. All right, Dennis Strakota.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Dennis Strakota, 5051 Brule Drive in the Trailside neighborhood. So I wanted to comment and just ask a point of clarification, not that you would answer necessarily, but would take into consideration on item 7A, which is the first reading of the ordinance on land use amendments. So I was not able to attend the Planning Commission meeting last week where this was taken up and where they recommended approval of these changes. Specifically, I'm interested in the amendment to the outdoor lighting section. So I have a great deal of interest in dark sky and helped organize a forum here in Timnath Together for Timnath on dark sky. So the amendment appears to be relatively innocuous by moving permissible use of lighting that's currently in that section from the prohibited uses to lighting design standards. That seems perfectly fine. The question that was raised after I viewed the recording of the Plan Commission meeting was is whether or not, what constitutes now permitted use with respect to lighting on roof lines. And so it wasn't entirely clear from the staff discussion as well as the commission member discussions whether or not certain roof line lighting was permissible. In particular, the example that came up was with respect to the car wash lighting along the roof line. And so I know that there was some sort of give and take between the commission and staff regarding that's been sort of a frequent issue that's been raised. And so I think it would be helpful for the public and for the council, if you don't already know, to be informed about whether or not that particular lighting is within the code. And if not, was it grandfathered in beforehand? Secondly, the other thing it does bring into question is the enforcement policy. So I know that staff mentioned that they have not received any formal complaints about that particular lighting. And so I'm wondering whether or not we are a bit more reactive than proactive in enforcing the code. And I know only in this past budget was a staff position approved for code enforcement. And so I'm wondering whether or not, whether or not the town will in the future be a little more proactive in addressing code violations where they're very obvious or significant. So I would hope that maybe the council could seek clarification and maybe get some information available before the public hearing is held on this. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Stokoda. I appreciate that. And as you mentioned, we do have first reading this evening. If it were to pass, our second reading and public hearing on that would be on February 24th, if anyone also wants to share their thoughts. Finally, Christina Galloway.
Hello, good evening. I am a small business owner on Main Street in Timnath. I'm the owner of Sustainable Mercantile and Refillery, and we just opened our doors in May of last year. So I am here because I had met with the Main Street Committee about a couple of things, but today specifically I came, it just happened to be the perfect day, honestly, because the Colorado Boring Company was boring in front of our business all day long. It was blocking the entire building, and so obviously one day of business where I have, things in front of the business, I just wish that I could have had a little bit of notice. So I'm asking the town council if you guys can provide the businesses that are going to be in the construction zone, especially as we move forward with the rec center, if we can get some notice of when that construction is going to be happening on our streets. I would have modified my business hours. I would have posted that on social media instead of losing an entire day of business. And it's a really delicate situation on Main Street with businesses right now because the road has been blocked. We are not getting much traffic. We're not getting much business. So if we want Main Street to thrive in the near future, I think definitely things like this that are pretty delicate for us need to be addressed. So I would just appreciate that. And I did talk to other business owners, the Hidden Stem and Jesse J. Salon also, that said that they would appreciate that as well. Just a notice of when there's going to be construction or things going up in front of our businesses. The other thing, I guess, that I wanted to address, and a few months ago, the Main Street committee discussed having the grant program and changing some of the rules or the guidelines on that, the requirements on that. So I just didn't see any move forward with that. I didn't know if the Main Street committee had addressed that with you all yet. But we could use some financial help. I know there's several of us businesses that have been affected by the roundabout or the street blocking off. And so we've definitely, several of us have discussed that if we don't do something soon, that many of our businesses are going to go under. So I just wanted to address that with you all and just make you aware of what's going on and respectfully just ask for your help as well.
Thank you, Ms. Galloway. We appreciate that. And our Public Works Director, Mr. Stone, has heard everything you've said, as has our Community Development Director, Mr. Robinson. Feel free to reach out to any of them.
Thank you very much.
All right, those are all the folks I have signed up this evening. Before we move on, is there anyone that did not get a chance to sign up but would like to address council this evening? Okay. Then, seeing no takers, we will move on to council updates. Who would like to start this evening?
I have just a quick one. The Prost Committee, the Parks, Rec, Open Space and Trails Committee, met last week and reviewed some draft language for the reservoir plans, as well as the we called it the e-bikes, but it's the which wheels go where. So we kind of looked at that. That'll be language that will be coming before council within the next couple months. But it was a pretty packed meeting with the Prost Committee, and I know Tom heard all of our voices, and we'll put some of that feedback into the draft language that is brought before council.
Thank you. Member Jenkins.
Nothing to report.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I just wanted to comment basically on the which wheels go where. So I know there's been a lot of community feedback on that, and I think we're all hearing it and seeing it. Maybe Tom, could you maybe comment on how, are we getting a lot of feedback in the survey? Do you know how many responses we've gotten on that survey? Okay. And what are the ways for the wheels go where that we, what are some other ways community members can leave feedback besides the survey? Okay. Is there going to be something at the project fair? Okay. Perfect. Okay. And that's what I also wanted to comment is looking forward to the project fair this coming Thursday. So thank you, Tom. Appreciate it.
Yeah, just related to the which wheels go where. I presume that we're going to, as a town, communicate the specifics of which wheels go where and which kind of vehicles don't qualify to be in parks or on sidewalks or in bike lanes, specifically e-motos, of which there have been several e-motos, juveniles driving around Timnath Ranch of late, oftentimes at a high speed and in inappropriate locations. So part of that is education, not knowing that those particular devices require registration, insurance, a driver's license, and a motorcycle endorsement. And yet we have 13, 14-year-olds driving around town in those. So it would be behoove us to educate the parents.
Thank you. Any other updates? All right, I am going to stand for my update, and I'm going to ask council to join me down here. And I want to ask our town clerk, Melissa, to join us. This is a surprise for Melissa. Yeah. Yeah. So Melissa started with the town in 2008. She's been with us for 17, almost 18 years now. Served faithfully as our town clerk. I actually think she was the first person I interacted with in Timnath town government when I first moved to town and wanted to get involved. But Melissa's going to be leaving us, moving on to a new opportunity. But we as council, we as the town of Timnath, wanted to take this opportunity and sincerely thank you for your service and dedication to this town. I can absolutely say Timnath wouldn't be what it is today without you, and we are so appreciative. So with that, I'd like to present Melissa Peters-Garcia, Town Clerk, with deep appreciation for your dedicated service to the town of Timnath, 2008 to 2026.
So I just want to add to that as well, because as I look around the room at the council meetings, there are very few staff members who were here when I began my time on council. And Melissa, you are one of the very few who were here before I was here. And I know that when I was running, I had questions about finances and how to submit all of that, and you were super helpful for any questions that I had related to that. And I know obviously we're at an election year right now, and so you will definitely be missed for that, and I just want to thank you as well.
All right. Let's now move on to our regular business. Our first item will be first reading.
Mayor? We did miss the consent agenda.
Oh, look at that. You are right. Let's talk about the consent agenda, which consists of a single item. See, that's why you can't leave, Melissa. Consent agenda consists of one item this evening, approval of the January 27th, 2026 Town Council meeting minutes. Would anyone like to pull this item? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as read?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of approving the consent agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
I'm going to
Consent.
abstain since I wasn't at the meeting.
All right. Councilmember Jenkins abstains, and it passes 4-0. Now on to our regular business item 7A, first reading and setting a public hearing on February 24th, 2026 at 6 p.m. for ordinance number 4, Series 2026, and ordinance amending the land use code. Director Robinson.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. Again, this is a first reading. This is kind of a cleanup amendment to our land use code, which you're getting very familiar with. Regular amendments. Tonight, we're looking at several amendments. One of them are food truck vendors, temporary use, outdoor lighting, bike lanes, and ADU setbacks. Without getting into too much detail, again, tonight being a first reading, I just want to provide an overview of the changes we're looking at. So one of the things that our land use code currently has in the code is a food truck vendor as a use. Typically, food trucks operate within the right-of-way, which land use code doesn't regulate. So looking at our code, I wanted to move some of the more administrative standards, such as licensing, insurance, inspections, et cetera, to be part of a business license permit, a special use permit through events, which is something we're moving to. So that's a lot of the changes regarding food truck vendor. I did want to keep in place some of the aspects about signage and making sure they're not blocking right away or ADA access and what have you. By doing this food truck vendor amendment, again, it moves a lot of the permitting and licensing to a more administrative function. So, you know, most of the things that food truck vendors will have to do is they can get a permit either through Timnath or through another agency, which I cannot say that word. Reciprocity, thank you. Gets me every time. From another jurisdiction, we have to honor that. That's a state code requirement. But then we also want to make sure they have a business license for sales tax and other purposes. If they have those two things, they can operate their vehicle on the town streets so long as they don't park for longer than 15 minutes. There's other provisions, again, within those guidelines. I just wanted to pull a lot of that stuff out of the land use code because that's stuff the land use code doesn't typically regulate and wouldn't enforce through code enforcement. Also looking at the food truck vendors, it kind of opened up temporary use. So these are situations where private property owner may invite a food truck vendor to come onto their property for some thing, like a birthday party, an anniversary, or some of our businesses currently have food truck vendors that augment their services, such as Timnath Beer Works and others, where that type of use sort of falls outside of a food truck vendor. They're providing a service on private property. They're having permission from the property owner. So I wanted to keep the food truck vendor as a special use, but it's not within a temporary use, which is again like Christmas tree sales and grand openings and that sort of thing. So I needed to clean up some language in the temporary use section of the code. So that, again, is looking at some amendments there. So that's generally what the food truck amendment is doing. It's a lot of minutia, really, to make sure that we're processing the food truck licenses and permits outside of the land use code and making sure the land use code is kind of consistent with some of those standards. Does anybody have any general questions on the food truck vendor before I move along?
Yeah, quick question. And again, I don't even know if it would be considered a vendor. I just happen to live in a newer neighborhood that has construction. Great taco trucks come through every day.
Yep.
Don't park for more than maybe 5 minutes at most, maybe 8, depending on what the line is. Does that play a factor into this? I mean, if they're mobile, if they're on the go, but yet still come around every day, how does that work?
That's currently permitted in the town code, and again, wouldn't be regulated. Like if you read the code right now, it's a little clunky because it implies that might not be an activity that it's allowed in a residential district, but in a commercial district. Again, the land use code doesn't regulate what happens in street right-of-ways. There is a section on, I think, the municipal code that does allow for mobile vendors to sell ice cream or burritos or whatever, so long as they're just passing through, and oftentimes it's usually associated with construction workers and whatever. So that still would be allowed. We just want to make sure they have a valid permit with the town for business license, and they have the appropriate state requirements for licensing, fire inspection, what have you.
So no change to that other than we don't know if said ice cream truck or vendor or mobile coffee or construction taco shop, whatever it is, we don't necessarily know if they're regulated to this point, and then on top of that, I mean, I think we keep going back to the word of enforcement. What is how is that even really possible? Does someone call and say, hey, they're here, hurry up, 5 minutes? Like, that just seems like a burden on staff too, to enforce it.
Well, I think a little bit of that's, you know, depending on the vendor, if they have the appropriate health inspections. I mean, I think people would probably self-police, making sure that the business is legit, so it would be a complaint driven in that regard. Currently, a lot of the food truck vendors work with the town already for our town events, and so we have a good idea of which food truck vendors are currently operating in the town. Actually, that's where this amendment kind of was born out of, is kind of some challenges with town hosted events and getting the food truck vendors vetted through our planning process versus our special use event process. So that's the impetus of kind of the food truck amendment. Outdoor lighting, I'll try to address some of the comments raised, public comment tonight. Really what this came into was we recently updated the land use code for some lighting standards to be consistent with some dark sky standards. Did push out some social media stuff over the holidays, reminding residents about hours of operation and kind of the amnesty period on holiday lights. We got some mixed reviews on social media about some of that, and so it kind of took a time to go back and look at our code. The images you see on the right there are some examples of this chase lighting, or which sometimes could be holiday lighting, sometimes it could be architectural lighting, sometimes it could be security lighting. It exists in many different shapes and forms throughout Timnath. Currently, the way the code is drafted, it kind of conflicts with other sections of code, so it creates an interpretation challenge and an enforcement challenge. What is being proposed is removing the word chase lighting, because that has a very broad interpretation of what a chase lighting is. Typically, it'd be anything under the eave of a building. The picture in the middle there, that could also be chase lighting on any architectural feature of a building, which we don't have that example here in Timnath. But what I'm proposing is we move some of the prohibited sections of chase lighting under what's regulated, so that it regulates the intensity of the light, the voltage of the light, still allows for that to happen because it's pretty throughout our community. It would be very difficult to track and monitor lawfully non-conforming uses that happened prior to when this was amended. We don't require a permit for this type of lighting on any house. It'd be virtually impossible to regulate that way. However, we still have light trespass and other things to deal with, glare, light trespass, and others. So if there's an instance where exterior lighting isn't fully shielded, isn't being projected properly on a building, then we can deal with it through that means. I know oftentimes we get a lot of comments about the car wash across the street. Again, if did nothing, it could be under a lawfully non-conforming light because it existed prior to that change in the code. We could look at through enforcement with light trespass. So again, that was the impetus of some of the design, the changes with the lighting standards. Happy to answer more questions when you get into that during the second hearing. Any questions on that? The last two are really kind of clean up the accessory dwelling unit rear setbacks. Really, this is just to be consistent with state law and state code. So we're bringing some amendments forward with that. Amendment, and the last one is looking at the Lucas standards. That's the Larimer County Urban Area Street Standards, which is the street standards the town has adopted. Our land use code has some standards that are inconsistent with the Lucas standards, so this is making them consistent. So that's the changes that we have moving forward. Planning Commission did hear these recommendations. They did vote to recommend support of those changes with a 4-0 positive recommendation. The second reading public hearing will occur on February 24th at 6 p.m. Happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Thank you, sir. Folks understand that we'll have a full public hearing in 2 weeks. Are there any urgent questions? Then is there a motion to approve on first reading to amend the land use code and to set a second reading and public hearing for Tuesday, February 24th, 2026 at 6 p.m.?
So moved.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving this on first reading and setting for second reading and public hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, nay? Very well. We will be back Tuesday, February 24th at 6 p.m. Moving on now to our two public hearing items. First, ordinance number 2, Series 2026, an ordinance amending municipal code to provide that town penalties for criminal violations may not exceed the penalty for identical conduct under state statute. Ms. Steffel.
So back in December, there was an opinion issued by the Colorado Supreme Court for it combined two cases together, People versus Camp and People versus Simons. And in each of those cases, there was an individual who had been charged with a municipal violation, and they challenged whether that the penalties for that municipal violation were superseded by the state penalties. One of the cases was in the city of Westminster, and the second one was in the city of Aurora. One related to theft, and I think the other one was, I forget what the other one, criminal misconduct or something. So in each of those cases, the municipality had a more severe maximum penalty than the state penalty, and they looked at the sentencing reforms that had been passed by the state legislature for state statutes that set maximum penalties for state statutes, and the Colorado Supreme Court held that indeed, where there was identical conduct under both the municipal code and the state statute, then the penalty under the municipal code for the criminal violation could not exceed the maximum penalty under the state violation. So generally, the town and all towns and cities in the state of Colorado can have a maximum penalty of $2,650 for fines and up to 364 days in jail. And it's just a statutory maximum for any penalties. The way the town code is written, any penalty that any crime or violation that does not have another penalty defaults to that maximum, that it can have a penalty of up to 364 days and up to $2,650. Actually, it says 1 year, and one of the adjustments we're going to make is to correct that from 1 year to 364 days to make sure that it aligns. Now, the town does not have a practice of having many violations where they have a penalty up to that maximum amount, but it's possible. And so what we're doing with this legislation is to make sure that the penalties under the town code cannot exceed the maximum amount under the state statute for criminal violations. So that's what the first piece does. Okay. And up on there, you can see that, okay. The second thing, so the second thing that we do is the statute or the proposed ordinance number 2 would also say that for traffic offenses, the maximum incarceration cannot exceed the maximum incarceration for an identical violation under state statutes. And the reason for that was, even though the camp case doesn't directly apply to traffic violations, and we don't know if a court would extend it to violations, we didn't feel that it, as a policy matter, it was necessary to incarcerate people for longer than what was permitted under state law. And under state law, the current penalties are limited to, it depends on the type of the violation, But for, you have a state violation, if it's a class 1 misdemeanor, at that point, they can be incarcerated for up to 364 days or have a fine of up to $1,000. For a class 2 misdemeanor, they can be incarcerated for up to 120 days and a $750 fine. And for petty offenses, they can be incarcerated up to 10 days or a $300 fine. So one of the challenges against Westminster was actually a case where the maximum penalty under the state code was 10 days of incarceration, and Westminster allowed up to 364 days of incarceration. So not to say that they would have been incarcerated for that long, but that's the reason why it was challenged, and the Supreme Court did find that where you had identical criminal conduct, the state statute controlled even for home rule municipalities. Now, these maximum penalties do not apply to juveniles. The juveniles, just so you know, for FYI, under town code can be subject to the same fines, but they're not subject to incarceration under our town code. The town municipal judge has adopted a fine schedule. So if you go onto the town municipal court website, you can see a schedule of existing fines that are adopted. And when there's no penalty set under that fine schedule, that's when it defaults to this maximum of $2,650 and up to 364 days. Okay, so the ordinance basically is amends town code for consistency with this Colorado Supreme Court opinion to say that if there's a state law prohibiting the identical conduct as the town code or ordinance violation, the town penalty cannot exceed the maximum penalty set by state law for criminal offenses. In addition, it provides that for violations of the model traffic code that have a possibility of incarceration, then the incarceration shall not exceed the amount under the state statute. And finally, we clarify that the maximum amount of fines cannot exceed $2,650 per violation, and that's adjusted for inflation, so it might be a few dollars higher, and that incarceration cannot exceed up to 364 days. So as an example of when this applies, when we talk about identical conduct, we're talking about something that has the same criminal elements. And sometimes our town code has basically almost identical language as the state statute. For instance, if you look at menacing, how we define menacing, it's got the same elements as it does under the state statute. Similarly, harassment uses almost the exact same statute as the same language as the state statute to define what harassment is. So in that case, we look at our town code and say, okay, this is harassment under our town code. Our police officers can cite someone for violation of our town code, cite it into our municipal court. There's an identical state statute. Then we look at, is that state statute a petty offense, a class 1 or a class 2 misdemeanor? And then the maximum fine and incarceration cannot exceed that amount set by state statute. And our town prosecutor is very familiar with this case. She prosecutes in several different jurisdictions. So what she, and the judge is also familiar with this case. I've discussed it with both of them. And so they will incorporate this new limitation into their sentencing of town violations. Questions?
Thank you, Carolyn. And before we move to questions, this is a public hearing item. So no one has signed up, but I'll ask if there's anyone present that would like to speak to council on this. Seeing no one, council questions. Mayor Pro Tem.
Carolyn, let's say there's future state statute changes. Does this automatically change then based on what you've said tonight? So if they change their laws, this won't have to come back to council going forward, is that correct? Like, based on what I think I saw on the slides, it's just gonna automatically the way it's written tonight, it won't have to come back by council. Is that correct?
If they revise the maximum sentencing guidelines under state statute, that would automatically apply the same limitation to us. So you are correct. It would not have to come back to you.
Okay, thank you. And based on what I'm understanding tonight, we're not actually reducing our enforcement authority. We're just changing. Let me try to rephrase my question. So, this ordinance really is not reducing our enforcement authority, but we're ensuring our penalties are legally and enforceable and defensible. Is that right?
Correct. We'll still be able to enforce everything under our town code. It's just what is the maximum penalty for that violation may be reduced if the state has set a lower maximum penalty.
Okay, thank you.
Jenkins.
Yeah, so I presume there are some state violations with appropriate penalties that are not in the town code as well.
Yeah, the police department does have the ability to do citations also under state statute. So if there were something that were a violation of state statute, I think they could cite it under state statute. And whether they would write it into municipal court or county court, they may write it into county court, which is an option as well.
So if they cite something under a state code, not under a town code, it would go to county court, not town court. So the reason we have parallel ordinances with violations and criminal penalties is so that we can handle them within our own town court system.
That's correct.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, then is there a motion to approve on second reading an ordinance amending municipal code to provide that municipal penalties may not exceed penalty for identical conduct under state statute?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, begin a discussion. Councilmember.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. It's a state law, and we need to comply with the state law. And so it sounds like it's being written in a way in which if there are future changes in penalties at the state level, it'll automatically apply to our town code, which is a smart way to do it. So we don't ever have to revisit it again. All right, great.
Roll.
Agree.
Mayor Pro Tem? All right. Carolyn, thank you very much for your work on this. Certainly, the Colorado Supreme Court has dictated to us what we must do, and I appreciate you bringing forth a thoughtful way to do this. Certainly, we have grown accustomed to the state legislature not respecting home rule or local control and encroaching every chance they get on our authority to regulate our community as our community would prefer. It's disappointing to see our state Supreme Court hop on that bandwagon. That said, the truth is we incarcerate almost nobody in municipal court. We have never imposed jail sanctions above what's being discussed here. And when jail is imposed, it is really in an extreme circumstance where other options have been exhausted. Fiscally, it doesn't make sense for us to impose a lot of jail because we have to pay for those jail nights. So practically, this will not have impact on our operations, and that makes sense. Any other comments? Very well, then all those in favor of approving the ordinance signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, nay? It passes 5-0. Moving on to item 8B, ordinance number 3, series 2026, an ordinance amending municipal code to reflect town operational and statutory changes.
Thank you. So this is really a cleanup ordinance to revise a number of things in our town code that needed to be updated. The first change is Okay, we're adding a definition of chief financial officer and town treasurer. Those are both the town finance director is going to serve both of those roles. And we do use both of those terms in some other places in the town code where I thought it'd be helpful to have a definition, but also under state statute, there are certain obligations that are imposed for the chief financial officer or the town treasurer. And so then this clarifies who that person is to fulfill those roles under state law. In addition, when we're issuing bonds or something else, it's helpful to have clearly defined those roles. We always assumed it was the finance director, and now we're just clarifying that that is, in fact, who we intend for that position. The next thing is to update the town center address, and it shows you how long it's been since we've kind of done this cleanup ordinance. Is we still had the 4800 Goodman as the address of town hall, which is obviously not accurate anymore. That's now our public works building. So we have updated that to this current building to make sure that that is in compliance with our actual practices. The third thing is just to change the name of the Humane Society that we've contracted with to provide animal services to the town. Formerly was called Larimer County Humane Society. It's now called NOCO Humane Society. So we're just changing that in the definitional section. And then everywhere else, we just refer to it as Humane Society. So we just needed to make the change to one section, and then that's going to carry through. Hopefully they won't change again. If they do, I guess that's another cleanup, and but a really minor change for you. Finally, we are removing sections that relate to the Old Town Sewer Project. Those were put into the town code, and there was a whole section in 11.5.10 through 11.5.50. We have completed that project. That was the project where we wanted to decommission septic tanks and install the wastewater lines to connect to the town's municipal system. At this point, we don't need them in the town code anymore because we've completed that project. And then the last change relates to golf carts. These are, again, cleanup changes. The first change is to indicate that golf carts can go out of the bicycle lane or the paved shoulder when they're passing a bicycle or another vehicle. It just is a common sense thing that they can move around that vehicle. The second change is to update the names of the town streets that are less than 35 miles per hour because, well, they're more than 35 miles per hour. Golf carts are only allowed to be driven on town roads that are less than 35 miles per hour. So there's a list of which roads you may not drive them on because it's 35 miles or more. And we've added Timnath Parkway and Colorado Boulevard and Prospect Road to that list, updating the names of the roads that have that speed limit of 35 miles per hour or more to make it clear to our residents where they may not drive their golf carts. And staff recommends approval of this ordinance. It's really just kind of cleanup items.
Thank you. This item is set for public hearing. Nobody has signed up, but I will ask now if there's anyone present that would like to speak on this matter. Anyone, council, any questions?
So is River Pass on there? Because that probably was on there before. Is that correct? Because the speed limit went down on that one, but just confirming.
Yes, we took off Latham Parkway and River Pass Road and added Colorado Boulevard, Timnath Parkway, and Prospect Road.
So to be clear, if the speed limit is 35 miles an hour, is a golf cart allowed on that road? Because the way you said it is 35 or more and less than 35, and River Pass Road is 35 miles an hour. So.
Okay, I'm going to ask Kim to clarify. I'm not going to ask Justin to clarify that. As written, it has to be less than 35. But I'm going, oh, sorry, equal or less to, I missed the
Any
equal.
road that has a speed limit
Yes.
in excess of
They can
30.
drive on 35 miles an hour
Right,
or less.
or less. And the
I
way you
missed-
stated it was included 35 as prohibited.
I misstated that. You are
Yeah.
correct. Thanks for that
Okay,
clarification.
So that's why they are now allowed to ride on River Pass when they were not allowed to in the past because the speed limit was 40, correct?
Yes.
Correct, and that would be the only road where we have a bike lane where that's the case, because like you said, we lowered the speed limit a few years back.
Okay, thank you.
So, and they do have to use the bike lane, not the middle of the road.
Yeah, they have to be on the right side unless they're passing somebody to the right side as much as possible.
Got it.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
So two clarification questions, as Mr. Goldstein always puts it to the thousands that are listening on the interwebs. Two things of clarification that I don't see here, but maybe you can point it out. Number one, just because it's 35 or under, it still states that they're only allowed to do 20 miles an hour. Is that correct? Because the speed limit is not, it said, I thought I read somewhere that 20 miles an hour is, and on the right-hand side of the road, if a car is coming, there are rules and regulations. It's just not go 35.
You are correct. That's just not we have not changed that, but that will remain that the speed limit for golf carts is 20 miles per hour.
Okay. Is there anything in there that identifies, do they need seat belts, blinkers? Is it any golf carts are allowed? What is considered a golf cart? So i.e. A side-by-side ATV that is capable of doing 90 that people have in their garage? Is there?
Let me double check if we have a definition of golf carts. Otherwise, we could look at adding that under which wheels go where, but we would probably revert to the definition under state statute if we don't.
I feel like we did a golf cart policy at one
Yeah,
point.
that's what this is.
No,
Yeah,
but I
it-
feel
it-
like it talked about seat belts, license plates.
I thought they had to be,
Registration.
I thought they had to be registered and insured, and you need a driver's license in order to operate it, and seat belts.
I'm with you that I thought
I
we had
mean,
looked at all of that.
You know,
Okay.
Yeah.
and,
Is that,
I mean, what happens if you have a young child on board? Do they have to have a car seat or can they carry I mean, I've seen individuals carrying babies on a golf cart with no seatbelt.
I'm all for golf carts, but I think that clarification, or at least maybe point folks that are listening to where to go to find more clarification on this area, even more, what age is allowed to drive them? Because I've seen frequent, what seems to be maybe 10-year-olds driving golf carts at speeds more than 20 mile an hour.
Give me 1 second.
No worries.
Okay, we do have a definition of golf carts in our code. It's under section 8410 of the town code, and it's a self-propelled vehicle, including those with combustion or electric engines designed for recreational purposes that's not designed for operation on roadways. And then it goes into, has a design speed of less than 20 miles per hour, so it does address that concern. Has to have at least 3 wheels, a weight of not more than 1,300 pounds empty, and can carry not more than 4 people. And then,
So there are definitely golf carts around town that carry more than 4.
and it does says it excludes ATVs expressly, so it does not include ATVs. Okay, there is a requirement for turn signals.
I mean, my recollection when it was first allowed in town is that they had to have insurance. and they had to have seat belts. And I thought they had to have a driver's license.
Yeah, you're correct. So under the section, they do have to have a driver's license. Also, no person shall operate a golf cart on any roadway if the vehicle is carrying a greater number of passengers or greater load than the specified by the manufacturer. So it's based upon what the design of the golf cart is.
So if it's
Yeah.
designed to hold 6 people is okay. It sounds like maybe
You
there's
have to ask legal, but that's
a
the way it's.
conflict in the definition and what you're stating, Justin.
I view it as limited to 4 persons, so that's something we can look at with staff when we're looking at our new code changes related to vehicles, though we're not focusing on golf carts in that, but we can look at that question. Right now, it is limited to 4 persons.
Yeah, under the
under-
definition.
And and it licensed, does it require seat belts or insurance?
It does say that shall have liability insurance coverage.
Okay, and are seat belts required?
Found it. Yes, they must apply by state seatbelt system requirements
And that would apply,
if they're traveling at or above 20 miles per hour, which they're not supposed to. But
yeah,
but they
it
could
sounds
travel
like
at
we need a
20
little
miles per hour.
cleanup in our code, actually.
All right. I'm going to bring us back. These are great which wheels go where conversations. Any other questions on the specific proposed changes?
No, I'm fine with supporting this. However, it would be nice to have really clear set of regulations with regard to golf cart use within our town, so it's clear to everybody. So I would hope we could dig into that a little deeper and come back at a future point.
Okay, are we ready for a motion? Is there a motion to approve the ordinance amending municipal code to reflect town operational and statutory changes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah. I think we just need, obviously, these administrative cleanups on our code, so I'm going to support it. Obviously, we can't have these out there, so I will be voting in favor.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's a burden to continuously go through all these, so I appreciate staff's time in putting this together, cleaning things up as things change. And to Councilmember Jenkins' point of view, more to come from the sounds of it when it comes to what wheels go where, but great start, fully supportive of it.
Like?
Yeah, I'll support the changes.
All right. I have nothing to add. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Carries 5-0. We have run out of things to talk about, so we will stand adjourned.